So we'll have the wine later again. Sorry for my voice today. It's a pretty touched, but it shouldn't hold us. Come on, in the first row there's still some seats available. Come on closer, the wine is still there, the wine will be there after. So come on closer, deck the seats in the first row. And let's have some discussions and talk about the story of the hour, I must say the story of the year, which is going to be the merge, the switch from Ethereum, from, let's say, the proof of work consensus algorithm to proof of stake, which is now, it's been in media, in mass media, especially if you approach crypto in mass media, that has been the story, right? We've seen a lot of talk in recent days, weeks and months, what is all about crypto, and one of the biggest story is that, well, it's a waste of energy, and in times of energy crisis, this is, of course, a matter. But I guess that would be a matter for everyone else who is joining newly to the field, but now especially, we would like to address that from various angles, especially those from native crypto native Ethereum. What is the merge? What is happening with the merge? What is actually going to happen tonight or in the hours of next morning, so tomorrow? And I'm very delighted that we have one of, well, the experts here available in Austria and in Vienna, Andreas Pettersen, who will give us an intro on the merge. And I'll invite you onto the stage and give him all a big applause. Thanks, Andreas, that you're here.
Thank you very much. So I was a bit undecided if I should do the talk in English or German. Do we have any exclusive English speakers here today? Okay, that's enough. So we'll stick to English so that you won't get left out. So Ethereum has been around for a while, since 2015. And when people read the Ethereum white paper, it was obvious that things are not going to stay the same forever. There's going to be a lot of innovation and improvements over the time. And one of the core aspects of this is going to be hard, let's postpone it to later, was how can we transition to proof of stake in Ethereum? And there are many good reasons why you cannot simply bootstrap a network out of thin air from proof of stake. You have to build upon something else. And that something else at the beginning was, of course, Bitcoin, because there was a Ethereum ICO where Bitcoin was put in and Ethereum tokens were created, and then proof of work took on, and even more Ethereum tokens were created. Okay, so just to get a glimpse of the audience, who here in the audience owns any cryptocurrency or Ethereum in particular? Basically everyone. So you're quite familiar, so we can go into a little bit more in-depth discussion and a little bit more details. So on the left side you see a nice rhino. So I would say the heraldic animal of the Ethereum chain is of course the unicorn, which has a single horn. So now we need a second horn, and what animal has a second horn? It's a rhino with two horns. So that's why, I think that's the primary reason why this is the new heraldic animal. And on one of the countdown websites, which is now quite popular, I minted this token number 22. It's an NFT commemorating tomorrow's event of Ethereum. So this will close down in a couple of hours, and then it will no longer possible to mint those, and they are very cheap. So I would actually recommend you getting one. So it's like 50 USD or something to mint it as like minting cost. Okay, so now we come to the question, why is it called Leslie? And that's actually something very interesting and important. Leslie is based on Leslie Lamport, and the whole IT ecosystem is standing on the shoulders of giants. We basically all the problems have already been solved. And if you think that Satoshi Nakamoto was the one to solve the Byzantine fault tolerance, I have surprise for you. No, that was actually Leslie who solved it. Leslie Lamport was a very famous and still living researcher who is now, I would say, in a honorific retirement at Microsoft. I think he's quite old already, but he built all the basic tools that we use today in all the blockchains, and he coined the term Byzantine fault tolerance. Actually, he wanted to call it Armenian fault tolerance or something, but it was changed to Byzantine in order to not offend anybody. So that's why Leslie, the Rhino is based on Leslie Lamport, and we're using his algorithms. Like if you hear things like Tendermint BFT, that's exactly built on top of that problem. The only thing that Leslie Lamport didn't anticipate was he solved the problem how to communicate with other people. The problem was, how do you communicate with other people if you don't know who you are potentially communicating with? And that's the problem Satoshi Nakamoto solved with a simple game that is being played. So proof of work is actually a game that incentivizes people to behave in a specific way that leads to a specific outcome that what network participants want. So in the end, what we want to do is we want to build a longest chain with the most proof of work attached to it. So what miners or all the network participants do is they collect the pending transactions in the mempool, check which of those are potentially valid. That's quite easy to check. Then they just put them together in a block that's not larger than 1 megabyte. And then the game actually happens. So now there is like a slot machine. You put in something in the slot, which in the case of proof of work is energy. So this is this, I think the English term for this is you put in a stake, in a buy-in into a slot machine. And then there is a binary outcome. Either the amount of energy that you put in leads to a valid block, great, you have great success, you have earned the 6.25 BTC, or not, then the money is lost. So basically, if you behaved in the correct way, you build a valid block, then you get rewarded. If you don't build a valid block or you try to pull off an attack, the worst thing that can happen is that you lose your stake, okay? So if we want people to behave in a correct way, for example, if you want to run a society built upon that same principle, you would reward everybody with some euros every time they cross the street when it's green. That doesn't scale, of course, in the society. It kind of works for Bitcoin, but of course it leads to the outcome that a lot of people need to put in the amount of work and money and energy. Okay. So in proof of work, only good behavior is rewarded. For staking, the game is basically the same. So if you think about what I just explained about proof of work, I didn't repeat the same slide, but basically proof of stake is exactly the same. Instead of putting in energy, you put in tokens that you're risking, okay? And risking tokens means if you produce an invalid outcome, then you won't produce a valid block. But the profit calculation is the same, except for if you try to cheat in the system, there is an opportunity to get slashed. So what you're risking is also like you would risk your whole miner that would explode, as an analogy. But we'll get into some of the details soon. So when people thought about how to implement this proof of stake, they came up with some very simplistic solutions. And a very simplistic solution is, for example, like a round robin. We elect a new leader based on the amount of coins that you put in. There is some random aspect to it, which can depend on the transactions that are being created, and so on. And this did indeed lead to a problem that's circulating in the narrative, the nothing at stake problem. And the nothing at stake problem was a real problem that was not fully solved for a short amount of time, I would say between 2013 and maybe 16 or so. Because the earliest proof-of-stake chains indeed had this vulnerability. And some were also successfully attacked using this vulnerability. But that can be countered with a very simple concept, and I think the term accountability is the key criteria. You need accountability for what information you're creating and what information you're emitting to the network. When you commit a crime, like for example contradicting yourself, what was the order of transactions that you encountered, that can be used as a cryptographic proof to say, if I have those two messages that are contradicting each other, I will include both of these messages in the blockchain and prove that this particular network participant did cheat at the system and will actually remove an amount of coins from his wallet as part of how the blockchain progresses. And this error state, or the attempted attack on the network, is becoming part of the chain. That is extremely rare because nobody tries to do that on purpose. But of course it can happen accidentally, and it did happen accidentally. For example, it can happen when you run the same validator nodes on two different computers that are not exactly talking to each other with the same configured, with the same private keys. That actually did happen, and there were several instances, I think I can remember at least 3 of them, where staking pools who actually did utilize other people's funds were slashed by the network and lost funds even in the Ethereum beacon chain. And of course, one of the core criticisms as well from people who don't like proof-of-stake systems, or who try to address concerns here, and that's a fair criticism, is how do you launch a proof-of-stake chain in a fair way? For Bitcoin, it was very obvious. There was like a mailing list for cryptographers, and if you happen to be on that mailing list at the time when Satoshi posted, I was on that mailing list, but I didn't react to the email, unfortunately. Then you would have a chance to participate. Is that fair to pick those cryptographers who are on the mailing list? Well, it's not. There was nothing better at the time, but it started off, and everybody who heard about it could participate by doing proof of work. So I talked a lot about Bitcoin, and the obvious question comes up is, are we going to use proof of stake for Bitcoin? And I think it's very obvious. No, we are not going. It's not going to happen. The core value proposition of Bitcoin is that it is basically immutable. It will not change. It will continue to happen as it is. What we already see is that there is a lot of regulatory interference in how Bitcoin is being used. And I'm pretty sure that the energy concerns can be turned into a net positive for, let's say, the global energy grid, the way Bitcoin could potentially be used. We see that already in Texas, when Bitcoin miners turn off their miners when the heat wave is coming, when there is too much, when it's too cold, and they simply profit by not spending the money on the energy. And this extra demand on the grid leads to spare capacity being able to profitably sell the spare energy to Bitcoin miners, for example, in Texas. And I think that makes a lot of sense. If there are a lot of challenges in building up a healthy, sustainable, renewable energy grid, and Bitcoin can be a puzzle piece here. So I think there is some real utility in simply also having a proof of work chain. Do we need more than one proof of work chain? Not for practical reasons, I don't think so. The other reason is proof of stake only works if users believe that the coins have any value. And this is very subtle how you think about it, but if it was that Bitcoin gave away all their coins for free, how would anybody deduct that those free coins can potentially have value? So if the only way to obtain is either by buying them from someone else or by putting in the energy in like kilowatt hours with the CPU to create the coins, then there is a non-zero cost to Bitcoin. And that's where the whole idea of a synthetic token with a limited supply and a growing demand getting some value and some utility came on, and that would be impossible with proof of stake, bootstrapping. Okay, but we are bootstrapped, so we are the lucky ones. We don't need it anymore. Okay, so what are the goals of Ethereum proof of stake? So there are, from a network stability perspective, two primary goals for Ethereum to fulfill. One is, let's get real finality. The real finality means there is a point in time where there is no longer a chance that my blockchain will be reverted, but I will have absolute certainty. The other thing is dynamic availability. Can I grow the chain even if there is a big network split? Can I reason about the validity of transactions and give it a probabilistic chance that it will be included in the final chain, yes or no? So these two goals obviously contradict each other. So there was from a network research engineers, it was proven formally that those two goals are not compatible with each other in a single blockchain. That's why Ethereum 2.0 or Ethereum proof of stake uses a combination of two protocols that are working with each other. One is the Casper FFG is responsible for the ultimate finality, and the LMD Ghost is responsible for the dynamic availability of data. So there is a very clear structured time frame of 13 seconds or 12 to 13 seconds where there is always a new block expected from the Ghost algorithm. We have block proposers whose duty is it to gather the transactions in the mempool and identify those that haven't been included yet and make a reference to the previous block. And they have to propose these blocks, and then after all the 50 blocks there is a new epoch, and inside that new epoch all the other validators are hierarchically voting on the validity of these other blocks. And that's because there are a lot of validators. There are in fact 470,000 or something validators running right now. This takes a little while to do this in a hierarchical way. That's why it takes 50 blocks to validate. So, as I already explained at the very beginning, in 2015 there was already mention of a proof of stake algorithm, but it was not fully spelled out exactly which algorithm, when exactly it will come, whatever. And if you are trying to research that problem, don't assume that everything that you find is actually the latest version which was actually then implemented, because the latest changes to the core specification was actually done in December 2021, as far as I could find. That was already after the launch of the Genesis block of the Beacon node. The latest comprehensive paper that describes everything is the one from 2020 from Vitalik Buterin and other authors combining Ghost and Casper. And this Ghost was then called simply Ghost and not LMD Ghost. I think that was an addition that was put in even after that comprehensive paper. And Casper is Casper the Friendly Finality Gadget is also a reference to some spiritual being, like from a movie. Yeah, so that's the algorithm that provides the full finality. So the Beacon chain was launched in December 2020. So we were participating in the Beacon chain launch, and the Beacon chain back then in December 2020 is simply a chain only for future block proposers of the Ethereum proof of stake chain. That does not include any transactions where coins are sent back and forth. The only thing that it does is produce new blocks, and there is very, very limited interaction that happens between those block producers. It is not possible to put in any state except for a graffiti field where you can, for example, write the name of your validator into. And people started to get into this, the earlier you joined, there is a fixed amount of ether. I think it's 1,600 ether per day that is being issued into this beacon chain, and that is being shared among all the participants. So if you are at the beginning, there was I think like 8% like return rate, a yearly return rate expected, but it was of course locked, and it's still of course locked. And to be honest, I'm not even sure if anybody knows when and how exactly those validators will be able to unlock those coins in the future. So right about now, we are above 400,000 validators, which come from many singular entities, but also some very big players, which I'm sure we'll talk about and get into this as well. And one, I think, very important part before the merge was the introduction of a new gas fee schedule. The EIP 1559 is extremely important. I'm not sure, raise of hands, does everybody know what 1559 is, or about 10% of people? So let's, because I think it's very important, I'll briefly explain it. So when you pay for a blockchain transaction, usually you pay a certain mining fee for it. So you do the same on Bitcoin, on Ethereum, and so on. And in the beginning, the notion of a mining fee in Bitcoin is very implicit and very linear. The bigger your transactions is, the more fee you have to pay to be included. That was basically the same as well for Ethereum, where you have specify a gas limit. But now this gas limit, but that is not sufficient for a good user experience, because you cannot predict how many people will put in transactions in the next block, in the next 15 seconds or 1 minute. So what Ethereum introduced is a much more predictable way of handling the gas costs, where the gas is partially burned, simply removed from circulation, and only a small tip is being paid to the miner. And the miner has no way of influencing the burned amount. And that is the one that is dynamically adjusted based on the usage level of the blockchain. And I'll get to this later. And of course, very important, the two independent implementation, one for the beacon chain and one for the Ethereum one, which is now basically just called the execution engine. Those are two separate specs. So if you were running a GEF client before, if you were connecting to an Ethereum node or something else, then you connected to an Ethereum one execution node. And you will still do the same if you are using a wallet like MetaMask or something else like Coinbase Wallet. But those execution nodes had the very simple implementation for reading the proof of work header and then deciding what is the longest chain. This was relatively straightforward. They had to do a lot under the hood to maintain their database for reorgs and so on, but basically the algorithm was quite simple. So now this algorithm is much more complicated with those two independent blockchain structures. That's why this work is now offloaded to a consensus node. And from those consensus nodes, those are the same that are also running the validator nodes on the Ethereum proof of stake system. And they now have to talk to each other in order to have a true full node. So every execution node up until tomorrow morning will be independently able to do this, to assess what is the current state. When the merge is done, they absolutely need a connection to a consensus node to determine what is the latest state. So how is it going to be activated, the merge? How are these two networks being connected? So very recently, there was a new hard fork called the Bellatrix hard fork. I think it's clear that Bellatrix Lestrange from Harry Potter is an evil character. So she puts in a curse on the Ethereum 1 chain, on the proof of work chain. And there is now this TTD, terminal total difficulty. Terminal is not a good term, so it's meant for death. This is when the code of the Bellatrix hard fork decides to stop working on its own from the proof of work. but it automatically switches over to the connection to the consensus nodes. And it also means that there is not a specific block time or a specific timestamp proposed. The proof of work miners are mining into their own death. They could simply stop mining or just simply have a cartel that says, no, we are going to delay this, we are just going to mine a bit more slowly. But they are all greedy and continue to mine up until tomorrow morning to reap the maximum reward as long as it's possible. So they could still stop it if they wanted to, but I think it's unlikely from a game theory perspective. And then the beacon chain takes over, and the validators will have the role of basically dictating what the longest chain is. And the whole blockchain should continue without any interruption. All the services have already been upgraded to use the beacon chain. As far as we know, I hope Etherscan will work. I don't know it for sure. I hope all the exchanges will work. I hope Bitpanda will still work. With the deposits, I'm pretty hopeful that this will all work, and we already also updated our blockchain system at capacity. Okay, so what are the core advantages? I think most of you guessed it already. There is a lot less variance on the block times. Of course, the energy consumption goes away. So now we are at a reasonable amount of energy that is being consumed. A bunch of servers running and exchanging information. No massive investment of graphics cards. And for the users, much lower ETH emissions. I think I have a separate slide on that, how much lower it is. True finality. So if you were using or any proof of work chain, when you make a deposit, you have to wait for a number of blocks, and depending on which service you use, how much security do you need. There's sometimes 2 blocks, 6 blocks, or even 60 blocks, or 300 blocks that you have to wait until your counterparty considered it to be done. Because there is always a chance that a reorganization on the chain might happen. And we've seen reorganizations on Bitcoin for 33 blocks. We've seen reorgs on Ethereum for 60 blocks. So it's not completely impossible that stupid things happen. On Ethereum too, this is not possible, because if you have a 66% vote on the blocks, those are final, and this is the state, even if it turns out to be that there later comes like a contradicting statement by the validators. And of course, it's much more secure because I think this is better tested than any moon landing or any Mars mission regarding the units of account and how to get there, because this has been formally specified using like real scientific method for formal verification. I think a derivative of the TLA plus language was used. That is a language that was invented by Leslie Lamport, by the way, as well. And it was verified that the beacon chain contract works and so on. So there was a lot of validation done. And there were over 15 different merge events already simulated or executed successfully with some of them with real world value also behind them. Like, for example, upgrade of the Gnosis chain as well happened. Okay, so how can you also become a validator? It's actually surprisingly simple. The hardest part is the first one, have 32 ETH. That is the amount of money that you need to get started becoming a validator. Compare that, that's certainly not a trivial amount of money, but compare that to becoming a Bitcoin miner. How much money do you need to become a profitable or working Bitcoin miner? That is like add 2 zeros to that to be and buy some property in Iceland or in El Salvador at the volcano to get some good energy. I think that's like 2 orders of magnitude easier. Run a node at home, a full node at home, or use a hosted node at like AWS if you want to. There's a third possibility, just give your money to Coinbase or to other staking providers, to Lido, and then you could simply also do it. I'm not listing it here because I think it's not contributing to the, it's not the most, it's not contributing to the security. And also there are other risks involved that I wouldn't try to get you to experience, like getting your coin stuck at Mt. Gox or at Celsius network or whatever. So there can be many negative outcomes with that as well. I'm not thinking that, I do not think that Coinbase will do that, but there is no need to expose yourself to the risk. There is a very good guide how to get started. It's very straightforward to follow. You should read it through, understand the process, and maybe if you're like slightly technical and you have set up a computer, then set up a Linux node, it will take you half a day to set it up. So there are, of course, risks here, which do not make it a straightforward investment, like putting your money into like a stock or into some kind of security, because I think it's actually a professional work that you're performing when you are running a validator. You have the hot wallet problem. You have to secure the coin somewhere. That means you have to secure the underlying system and maintain it and keep the versions up to date and so on, and make sure that they are also backed up properly. Right now, there is no practical way to do key rotation. So if you think your keys are compromised, that's a pretty big problem. You have to wait for some network upgrades that I think will happen quite soon, but it was a problem for 2 years for many people. If you are offline sometimes, you don't need to freak out. There are only small punishments for being offline, but there are punishments for being offline. That is also the reason, and that punishment, by the way, gets bigger the more people are offline. Okay, so think about that. If you think it's a good idea to put your money to Coinbase and stake your money there, and for some reason Coinbase would be denial of service attacked, your penalty or their penalty will be greater than if you're simply a home user and you're maybe offline sometimes for a few minutes. And I think that aspect is not emphasized enough or not communicated enough. That's why many people decide to just hand over their money to centralized providers for staking. And there is a chance of burning the deposit if you misconfigure your nodes or run 2 nodes with the same keys. And there are centralization risks. I think Daniel has some good points on that. We will talk about that in depth. Okay, so what about the issuance rate of Ethereum? So as of today, we are still issuing 13,000 Ethereum per day. That's about slightly more than 2 Ethereum per block that is being issued into circulation for the miners. This is going to be reduced dramatically. Right now it's to 1,600 Ethereum per day. In addition to that, we have the situation where a majority of the Ethereum mining fees are burned and removed from circulation with the EIP 1559. So when you pay for your transaction on Ethereum, that money is not going in the majority, the majority of the money is not going towards the miner, it's going towards all the Ethereum holders essentially, because it's just removed. So the current statistic is, if you look at the mining fee and the fee is greater than 16 GWE, then at that point in time after the merge, the amount of Ethereum in circulation will actually shrink. So there will be fewer Ethereum being in circulation, which is surprising that you can run a blockchain with that property, but if it's popular enough, the fees are regularly rising above 16 GWE, so that's already happening. Okay, so the whole thing is great. I think it's one of the biggest steps and the most important step for Ethereum or for the whole blockchain ecosystem, because it's now proven that you can transition a blockchain towards proof of stake, and we see all these great advantages. And that will now enable a lot more players who were previously hesitant to enter the ecosystem for environmental reasons or also for performance or usability reasons, because all of these aspects will become better. It's simply an upgrade, and I think it's great that we have it. So we are going to continue to build products on top of Ethereum and also on other blockchain networks with capacity. We build a lot of NFT stuff. We know a lot about tokens and business models and so on, and we've built some great stuff. I'm not going to give you a full pitch. If you're interested in that, just come to me, write me at hello@capacity, and you see what kind of projects we executed. And yeah, thank you so much for your attention, and I hope we'll have some interesting discussions and questions.
Test. Yeah, thanks, Andreas. Big applause. You know that this was magnificent. And now we have a special guest, Daniel Bicher. I mean, I'm missing your Bitcoin cap. You're getting on. Oh, you have something with you. Tomorrow is going to be the BTC 2022 starting, so perfect timing for the merge anyway. But I guess that wasn't planned. Daniel, you are also a technical lead at Bitpartner, so. And many questions arise on that matter, also what involves, of course, the institutions and that part. So we'll hand over to you for a reply on this talk. So, right away.
Okay, hello. I don't really have slides, so maybe I'm less prepared. But I'm going to take a bit the other side, right? Just also remember, I'm not like completely against Ethereum or something. But I think it's not all roses and great. What the merge brings, so I think it's good in the public view also to discuss kind of the negative sides. So one thing Andreas already has mentioned is kind of the problem of who is staking or mining. So one thing I want you to consider is just how mining works, right? Mining can be hidden from the government. People do it still in China, even though it's like forbidden, and there's like a lot of underground mining activity as well. Where people can basically hide the activity to like not be censored quite well. Ethereum now moving to proof of stake basically has totally different stakeholders. So that also means that before you had miners, which were mostly like very technical people that were interested into like Bitcoin and also like very into the thing, let's call it like that. Now you have investors who own this thing afterwards. So basically, I feel like a lot of people invest into things without really knowing what it is, without really caring about it. And I think we also see that. I'm not sure if you can open the graphic shortly. Should I go? Or you can open, I think there's a nice homepage that shows it quite well. Yeah, cool. No. Yeah, exactly. So, one thing is like, okay, a lot of people don't care. And like, what do? They just give the Ethereum to Lido, which we already talked about, which is like a very convenient system. You basically give it to them, you get a token representation, and you can use it again in like other ecosystems. You don't have to do anything, you just get rewards. Means though that like more than 25%, I think it's like 30 something, of all Ethereum now belong to Lido, which is kind of a problem because they're a US entity. Other things also, you probably know Binance, Kraken, Coinbase. They are also partly from the US. Okay, let's leave out Binance, but Kraken and Coinbase are. So with those people alone, like more than 50% of the ETH are owned by like 3 entities that can now theoretically, right? Like they're also not incentivized to do it. Censor some transactions, maybe by forking, for example, the blockchain eventually. It's not right. It's not that they can say, okay, we don't include Tornado Cash transactions tomorrow. They would actually have to like create a new blockchain and fork it. But if enough incentives go that direction and like a lot of pressure comes, that could be, I think, a problem for Ethereum after the merge. Especially at this point in time, because it wasn't mentioned before, but like there's one more hard fork coming, the Shanghai upgrade, which takes, I think, half a year or a year to complete? Do you know?
It's not set.
It's not set.
It's not set yet.
But only from the Shanghai upgrade you can withdraw your stake from somewhere. Means like if you gave Kraken your Ether now and you see like, okay, Kraken is getting pressured by the US government to censor everything, you're stuck. You're stuck for at least a year. You can't even withdraw it anymore. Afterwards, probably decentralization is a bit better because if you see that happening to Lido, to Kraken, you can at least say, okay, I have, I think, 2 weeks, and you can get your money back out and kind of reduce the strength of one of those networks. But until this upgrade, it's kind of in their hands. And that makes me a bit worried about like Ethereum, especially in this year time frame. Yeah, and the other kind of, I'm putting on my Bitcoin hat for these things. The other comment I want to give for that is kind of the cool thing for investors, right, in the short term is you gain additional funds by staking. And actually, if it's deflationary, you are actually gaining something because you're gaining more than the inflation rate of this network. That also means, though, that like Lido and Kraken and Coinbase, they gain more than you probably. So like their shares of the pie are going to grow and yours are probably going to shrink because you might also just use it. So it will like more and more centralize a bit towards like the big players. And I don't think we can really like go away from that in the long term. Of course, there could be like a lot of people come in and buy some of their stuff up, maybe some banks and so on. But yeah, that's at least the kind of my quick pitch for the moment of things that I'm afraid about for the merge. That doesn't mean that technically I think it doesn't work. So I think the merge itself, like tomorrow, will work quite fine. It was exhaustively tested, so I'm not like afraid for Ethereum in the short term. This is more kind of the concern of like, is something like this long-term sustainable? Or are you going to have a great time for the next 10 years and then it's going to drop off a cliff because the US takes over? We've already seen that a bit with Tornado Cash happening. I'm not sure, do you know about Tornado Cash? So the problem was that, right, it's not censored. It's still on-chain. It's still a smart contract on-chain where you can basically put in Ethereum and wash your Ethereum. So that still works. But anybody who does it like won't even be able to go to Aave anymore and to any of the other things. So it's like, it's more like deplatforming, right? It's basically like, yeah, you still have freedom of speech, but they kick you off YouTube out of Twitter. it's kind of similar. So it's still not nice, and ultimately, right, I think that's not the worst thing that can happen. Ultimately, the worst thing is if they actually kick off Tornado Cash from the chain by like doing a hard fork, by like maybe one of those if those free entities have to collude by a government, and that's like a threat.
Yeah, so I have a comment on that.
Yeah. I think you can directly.
Yeah, so you said that there are like free entities. So actually, I think you are also staking Ethereum, right? So you are also also a validator. So I think you are simply part of that thing. It's the unknown. So these are the unaffiliated unknowns that are just not labeled with any big provider. Yeah. So this is like all the individuals staking or very small companies that don't register for this or are not in this statistic. So actually, there are some real numbers behind that, and maybe we could switch to my slides. And I prepared some bonus slides for this to get into this topic a bit more deeply. Bonus slides. So okay, I'll talk briefly about the roadmap in a second. But so there is like a term that's been coined in the blockchain industry since many years, the Nakamoto coefficient. How many people do I have to kidnap or put a gun or a law to their head or threaten them with jail if they don't comply to actually achieve anything? And there is no, so this is a snapshot. I put this together in a spreadsheet very, very quickly. So this is Bitcoin right now. So these are the big pools, and this is their share of mining power. And this is the sum of those shares. So if this gets above 51%, then you have an attack. 1, 2, 3. So the Nakamoto coefficient for Bitcoin to say, let's censor the chain right now for the next hour, okay, let's say, is 3. So I only have to take 3 entities and put their CEOs under arrest or whatever to force them to do something. As you explained, this will not last for very long because those pools, they don't run their own mining hardware exclusively, right? So they will quickly see their market share decrease. So this kind of attack will kind of work around, and then the government will have to threaten even more people to comply with that. So that's the Nakamoto coefficient today is 3. For the Nakamoto coefficient for the beacon chain, we have to exclude the unknowns because these are the individuals. We have Lido, Coinbase, Kraken, Binance, Stake2S, and so on. So if and the number that you have to reach is not 51%, it's 66% because that's the Casper FFG algorithm dictates that. So you have to do this. It's not great. I say it's a problem. Yeah? Why do we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Okay, we got from 3 to 6. Is that such a big win? I don't think it's a difference for the government if it's 3 or 6. So, well, it's a little bit better, but it's not good. So we have to do something for that. We have to decentralize all the things, and that's a process. And the thing is also, that's just one of many, many, many metrics, right? There are so many other metrics. What applications are running? How many people are participating? What kind of practical utility do we extract from them? What is their societal benefit that they are extracting from this network? Is it politically positive to censor it? Like in Tornado Cache, obviously it was, because there were some ransomware stuff and bad stuff basically going on through Tornado Cache. And especially I think it was a national security issue for the United States, because actually North Korea did launder significant amounts of money to build nuclear weapons and stuff with that money. So that is actually a national security concern, I understand it. And so we are not in a, there is the world of P2P, everything's free to speech, like protocol level stuff, layer ones, but there is like the layer 0, which is the societal layer, which kind of overrides that somehow. Okay. We have some more bonus slides.
Can I answer to that slide?
Well, this is great, guys. We are already in a discussion and heated debate. It's exactly where it should be. And I would leave that microphone here in the audience, because I guess a lot of educated opinions and questions on the audience as well. But listen, we have, if you go back to the website, we have Buddha between us, who is actually the spiritual director and author of this slide. And I guess we hand the microphone over to you. Maybe you give your ones.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for using the slide and the chart. It's a bit misleading, the chart itself, because Lido is actually 30 entities, so the pie should be a bit smaller. But the reason why I made it as a single pie is because it's its own entity, right? But it's 30 different block proposals, which would be equivalent to 30 mining pools, because mining pools are those that actually propose the block. And the difference is, proof of stake is, like, even though, like, if Lido is that big and they do something malicious, they would get slashed. Whereas in mining, if you own more than 50% of the hash rate and you attack the network can't do anything, right? So what they could do, like what Bitcoin could do, is they could escape to a different mining algorithm. But the issue with that is that there are not many different mining algorithms. So the malicious hash rate gets bigger and bigger because it's more, because hash rate is incentivized to join the malicious power because those get the rewards, right? Yeah. But whereas with proof of stake, it doesn't matter how much of the SLY is malicious, because those that are malicious can get slashed by the minority, and that's the advantage.
Yeah, I want to comment on both of those things. Give me 1 minute. So Lido, yeah, I give you that point. It's not as clear cut, and that pie is a bit too big. Fair. I think one big problem though is like, and that's what, if you, can I go forwards again? Like forwards to go backwards? To this, yeah, there was this nice slide. So at least here, right, one of the problems is, and that's exactly what Andreas said, like, you can switch your miners. So it's basically like an election. If Van der Bellen tomorrow says, how about we invade Germany? You can like switch your vote immediately in like Bitcoin. But in here, basically, they have a year, like probably, at least until the hard fork. They have a year to convince a lot enough people to censor the Ethereum chain. And it's not like you can immediately switch away your vote anymore, at least for the time being, right? So I think that's at least the threat for censorship at the moment until the Shanghai upgrade is a bit bigger, and it's not as clear cut as like this slide I think makes out to be, because you can change your vote, so to say, very easily as a miner. And to the pool slide, if you can go back. I mean, that's also where other people can comment. I mean, Lido, yeah, it's a lot of entities, and they are basically in this like one pool. But if the US government says, yeah, you can't like use this token anymore if you don't comply with our thing, then it's over, right? And that's the same problem. That's actually another problem that we have now with Ethereum, is that right, I think everybody sees it as good that Theta and USDC, the two biggest stable coins, they basically said, yeah, proof of stake, yeah, we go along, it's really cool, like that's what we want, and we don't want the other thing. But that means they give a vote, right? And if those three entities and USDC and USDT are forced to go another way, then I'm sure a lot of the unknowns will also go that way, because it like makes economic sense to not go against USDC and USDT. Yeah. They are like already so big that it would destroy all the Uniswap pools, it would destroy like a lot on the Ethereum chain, and I think we will see that very nicely tomorrow morning with ETHW, because they exactly have this problem. They fork the chain, but ultimately they have no power, because USDC and USDT are not on their side, so like all the like liquidity pools, everything that's on Ethereum on the other side, so to say, we get drained immediately, and it's going to be a complete chaos. And right, if something like this could happen to Ethereum, that would also convince a lot of people to, yeah, maybe we should try censorship once. And I think that's kind of an additional threat we have here. I'm not saying it would happen. I'm also not saying like that the US government is like so technically capable to like do this attack now immediately, but I think it's a valid concern, at least from my side. And somebody can please comment.
Can I say? I just want to say, like, I work for Beacon Chain, but Beacon Chain also operates the largest Ethereum mining pool until tomorrow morning. And I've seen both sides. So if you say miners can switch mining pools, that's right in theory, but practically most don't care. Like even today, people are not aware of the merge happening today, and we still get messages like what's going to happen, right? But yeah, in theory, you could switch a mining pool, and there are only like 5 of them. But in proof of stake, you only need like only one entity that is honest to keep the chain alive. You don't depend on mining pools. It's true for Lido, but if Lido is malicious, they can just get erased from the network, and that's the strength of proof of stake.
Yeah, I think it's correct. It's basically the classical attacks on like proof of work. They simply don't work with that anymore. Some of the attacks that you mentioned, like for example USDC and Tether and so on. I mean, this is another dimension of decentralization simply. That doesn't have to do anything with the consensus algorithm. That's simply a state of fact. With every soft fork that happened on Bitcoin, there was a decision, do we support the old or the new one, which was very obvious in most cases for the exchanges, because it's simply, when you deposit something, which chain are we going to send out the money, which chain are we going to accept the deposit? So that's a decision that is very heavily dependent on the exchanges, which is a bit different for Ethereum, because it's not only the exchanges, there are also now other players who have a very big say in that. So I think we see that there's simply an evolutionary step happening. Yeah.
Absolutely. We are at one big if one network participant gets malicious. At what point each other network participant realize that this network participant is turning malicious?
Well, a malicious network participant will quickly run out of money, simply, because they get slashed when they misbehave.
Yes, I think that is clear. But at what point other network participants realize that this network participant was malicious or is enforcing malicious actions?
Well, people at home will never notice it, but their node software will do it immediately after a second, like after some epochs, like after some minutes. Yeah.
So they have to do it together, right? So if there's really like an attack here, they have to do it together. But like, of course, you can show that you are like supporting censorship by like a lot of those entities will already not include your Tornado Cash transaction in their blocks that they generate. I'm pretty sure. And I think that will already show that like a lot of those people are at least censorship friendly, and that's kind of step one of the problem. Doesn't mean that they don't have to validate their blocks, right? Because somebody in the back here will take the Tornado transaction, will include it, and then everybody has to take it. But like, it's still a problem.
Also, I mean, also censorship, it's very subtle. It's probably worth a very detailed analysis, but to my understanding, the only thing that you can do is you can simply choose to ignore that you saw a certain transaction from somebody, but the way the blocks are interleaved and those two blockchains are moving quickly one after the other, you still have to confirm the other block, which is already final, which might include one of the bad transactions. So you don't really have a choice other than burning your money, and that will not work in the long run. Even if you build a full cartel, then it will simply also not work, because there might be epochs where your cartel will not have the majority, and then those transactions will be included.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I mean. Like, if there's an attack, it has to be coordinated between all of those people. It can't just be one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, to start off the Q&A, so everyone invited to just jump on in and ask some questions, also from the online audience. Maybe I kick off with one very simple question to you, Daniel. Are my ETH at Bitbundle safe, and is Bitbundle supporting ETHW?
I'm not a co-founder or something, but yeah, of course they're safe. Like, we support the merge like everybody else. The ETHW thing, the problem is it's not in our hands, it's in nobody's hands. There's like a few developers that want to make this fork, so we just have to see if it actually exists. And once we know that, then we can make a decision, and that's what kind of every exchange said about it. Yeah, already the communication is very, very strange. They say basically, oh, it's not happening at the merge, it's happening 24 hours later, and they haven't released the final software yet, but they will get to it eventually, and let's see what happens. It's not in our hands with ETHW. If proof of stake, ETH will be the law of the land from tomorrow for us too.
Yeah, I think for people who were just recently mining Ethereum, they will probably switch to ETH Classic or even Ravencoin or something else, because that's where the action is happening. I think the ETH POW thing, it mostly came into existence by incompetence. I think even like Coinbase had to do like emergency hotfixes and post patches to them. I'm not too optimistic about that part, so we'll see what happens in 24 hours after the merge, which is also strange, as you said, that it's not happening immediately. Yeah.
You don't seem very competent.
What is on the watch list for NFT? Let's say artists building on ETH. Is there any point of action for those? Well, let's say NFT.
No, if you're a user and you're a collector of NFTs, or then you don't need to do anything. If you run infrastructure that is building and holding assets, where you have a website that deals with NFTs, like we provide for companies, then there is needs to upgrade the backend infrastructure. You have to, instead of running one full node software, you have to run those two stacks. You have to configure them correctly, and you have slightly more resource demands because the overall transaction volume is going up a bit. So, yeah.
Okay. We are here not only to educate and talk about crypto because we're crypto enthusiasts, because also we want to bridge the gap between crypto and the rest of the world out there, or the old world. So now, to get the big picture, is the merge, now the switch from Ethereum to 2.0, a game changer, where we see, okay, now Ethereum is getting into, let's say, more adoption? Is the green transition the story which might take up and would lead to financial institutions or other institutions to build on Ethereum, to build the Ethereum ecosystem further, and to use Ethereum as a smart contract platform? Would it be the case? What do you predict?
So maybe we could put in the roadmap slides that I prepared. So basically, I think it's just one very important, but in terms of impact on usability, it's not a big step, really. It's slightly more consistent to have your transactions. It has a massive energy impact, so that means I think players that are like from the ESG world, or simply people who want to feel good about the environment, they will now not be held back. I'm pretty sure they will find other excuses why they don't want to do it, but that's a different discussion. Yeah, thank you for this. So this is basically, it's completely unusable as a slide, sorry for that. But basically, this is the roadmap that was originally proposed by Vitalik, where you have all these small little boxes that are massive improvements and massive things that are going to happen. And here we have like the preparation where Ethereum 1 was, and then all the steps towards the paradise, which is the ultimate blockchain greatness. And we are now here at this step. So we just made this. That's it. But all of this other stuff, this will have way more impact for users, especially the data sharding for really cheap transactions or for other third-party blockchains being able to put their roll-up on the Ethereum chains and so on. The whole roll-up, how to build layer 2 chains in a trustless way. This whole story will come along, and then all of these new extra very important improvements. For example, this is one of my things that I'm putting a lot of attention to, post-quantum cryptography, which is like how do we secure the blockchain against quantum computers. I think will be a hot topic. So there's a lot of stuff to do. And the thing is also, in the beginning, we had other roadmaps that look like this. So I've just put it in here to show how completely irrelevant these roadmaps are. This is completely not what was happened. Yeah, so that was like an illustration of how people thought in, I think that was like 2019 still, how the whole transition is going to happen and is going to happen. Like you have these shards and then this phase 1, 2, and so on. We just made this step and we skipped these steps, okay? So these other steps, they are irrelevant. If you see graphs like this, please just ignore them. There's a lot of half correct information out there which explains it based on outdated structures, concepts, yeah.
Now, speaking about greatness, well, this slide is pretty great. I mean, if we talk about Ethereum killers, we had a lot of Ethereum killers were coming up, so-called Ethereum killers, in the race of protocols, in the race of blockchains. Is now the merge putting an edge to Ethereum in that race of, let's say, development, of usability, of platform infrastructure?
I think it's just caught up. Yeah, so we had basically this, I would even call it an anachronism, that we had Bitcoin that has proof of work and Ethereum, which also has proof of work, and all the other networks, they run mostly fine with proof of stake. I mean, they have other problems, but the fact that they were using proof of stake was not one of them. So it was like Ethereum had to catch up, and Ethereum proves that it is capable of making these very drastic upgrades. And I don't think that this is like a proof of, let's say, dictator Vitalik coming down and saying, yeah, you all have to do this. It's just that the whole industry wants to do this, and there are so many independent teams that are working on this with different motivations and not exactly all coming out of the same pocket. So it's not like one company doing it. So I think it proves that there is a lot of decentralized momentum behind it. Other blockchains such as Solana, Polkadot, even Chia I would put into this, and of course all of the layer 2 chains, they are in some aspects quite ahead in research and technical, maybe not maturity, but let's say sophistication level. But they don't have the whole ecosystem, industry, developer, etc. behind them to really produce all of these results. That can change, of course, over time. And especially when we see the Ethereum one chain, or the Ethereum proof of stake chain, is still going to be clocked. It's still going to be expensive to do these transactions. You cannot sign into your account using an on-chain transaction. You cannot put your projects for where you house construction, documentation, where you put all your attachments on top of it, on top of Ethereum layer 1. That's just not, that would be maybe an interesting use case for other chains that are specialized in that regard. But on Ethereum layer 1, it's simply not going to happen. So this is where innovation is happening very, very quickly. And it's great we have a new tool in the box to say, how do we anchor this to a really secure base chain now?
Yeah, cool. Ladies and gentlemen, questions, remarks, discussions from your side?
I have a bit of a concern in the sense you mentioned that people who have staked, they cannot get their tokens back until the Shanghai fork is there. And this merge took more than 1.5 to 2 years, like, oh, it will happen in the next 6 months, 6 months, 6 months, and tomorrow is that 6th month, right? So what will happen when there is something like Shanghai fork and they'll say, oh, it will happen in 6 months, And probably that 6 months will come in 2030 or 2035. So,
I mean, like,
how does Ethereum, in a sense, make sure that we are going to stick to what we say today and not keep doing these hard forks every 2-3 years because the foundation thinks, oh, we have something better to do?
I mean, right, it happens in all tech projects. They're always delayed. But like, I think, right, I hope at least from the Ethereum Foundation perspective, I had the feeling, maybe that's unfair a bit, that there is more competition now in the space, and that's also why the merge suddenly went a lot faster than a lot of people expected. And I think that might also happen to the Shanghai upgrade, so I'm defending Ethereum here, that like they will like try to deliver that on time because people have those concerns, especially now with Tornado Cash. But of course I can't guarantee it. Do you have any more?
No, I completely agree. This might be a problem down the road. I think there were very interesting bets going on, especially with Hubertus setup in Austria with his predictive side. When is the Ethereum hard fork going to happen? And all of us were wrong on that question. With the Shanghai upgrade, I think the technical complexity is much lower. It's just a matter of, okay, do we want to enable it, and what are the objectives? And I think that what we saw in simplifying things and leaving data shards out and leaving a lot of other stuff out is that this was the key to actually getting it released now. There are many people who are earning a lot of good money up until today, who have a big incentive to just bringing up new concerns why it should be delayed, right? And I think one of the most blatant attempts, to be honest, was this whole, let's now switch the proof of work algorithm for some reason. I'm not sure, you certainly know about it. What was its algorithm called? What? Rock power, yeah. I think that was just so blatant. Let's delay proof of stake, to be honest. I think that was the only real motivation behind that whole discussion. And that discussion derailed, what took away the air for like half a year for sure, just to fight it off or whatever it was called. So I think that slow down factor is now gone because now it's there. So now we have basically the whole ecosystem behind it to get the roadmap executed a bit faster now.
Thanks.
The reason why it's sped up is because the client teams received like $15 million stuck in the contract, and so they're incentivized to develop faster. Yeah. And like their own money is locked, right? That's kind of the reason.
Yeah, I'd have a question. What do you think all the existing ETH miners are gonna do starting from tomorrow? Like those guys who have the hardware, who have the facilities. I mean, well, obviously, like some of them, as you said, like are gonna continue or are gonna mine ETH-W, right? That's one portion. One of them, as you also mentioned, are gonna do like other things like Ravencoin or ETH Classic, for example, right? But then, I mean, I guess the thinking goes like some of them are just gonna shut down entirely, right? But are they really? Like, I mean, they have all these like this investment with the hardware, in the hardware, right? Like, what are they gonna do?
Like, I think they make the same ideas. They have the same ideas as Bitcoin miners, right? As long as it's profitable with the energy they have to put in, they will mine. And if it's not anymore, then they won't. And Ethereum was definitely one of the strongest like altcoins. It's still, right? It's number 2, where you got kind of a lot of money for your mining power. And now that this drops, of course, they get less rewards. So a lot of people will say like, okay, now it's not profitable for me anymore. But of course, also as like you both said, like some people will like mine like another coin where they see still some profits in it. I don't really know how big the reward drop-off is for those people. Does anybody know? No?
I think it's...
I also think it's
at least 10 times less or something.
I think it hurts. Yeah. So I think, right, if it's 10 times less, then a lot of people will say like, good night.
Yes. Yeah. No, I can tell you, it was very simple. When I started with Bitcoin, I mined on GPUs, and then the difficulty got up because people were developing FPGAs and ASICs, and then tried to get those. And I simply sold my graphics cards to some guy who created unlock codes for mobile phones with that graphic. I don't know how he did that, but he was very interested in those graphics cards, and they wanted to buy as many of the same graphics cards as possible. And I got basically the full investment of the hardware back. I'm not sure if that's, are people going to run, I don't know, stable diffusion algorithms like AI image generators on that? It seems to be quite GPU intense right now, and it seems to be quite, or are they going to, I don't know, do machine learning on a massive scale with that? Maybe that makes sense. I don't know. There are applications for GPUs. They are certainly going to the gamers market and go. I mean, that was an absurd situation for gamers. They wanted to get good performance for their PC, and it was basically impossible. But that changed like half a year ago when it was clear that people are not going to continue investing and stocking up on more graphics cards. Also, I'm not sure what's happening with the Ethereum ASICs, because I'm not an expert on this. You are certainly much more, yeah? But there are Ethereum ASICs, and those people who sell those say they are so superior there's no point in even using GPUs. They are certainly going to be shut down. I don't know. So I do expect a drop in energy, in total energy usage, yes. So maybe that will lead to very cheap heating costs in Vienna. I don't know.
Yeah. We'll see.
No, nobody mines in Vienna anymore. Just saying. Or like very few people. It's not profitable with the energy costs.
There was someone over here with a question.
Yeah, I've got a question for Andreas. When you were speaking about the chart and decentralization of staking pools, and you said that it's not ideal that those big players basically have a say. Philosophical question, what would you say is a better solution? Because Kraken, Coinbase, Lido, Binance, they do have that part of the pie just because they provide good UI and UX for the stakers.
I don't think that this is the biggest problem, to be honest, right now. I think there is already a slightly better situation than in other networks. I think what must happen is that people who want to stake should know that there are downsides to just simply putting it there. There are massive counterparty risks. That's not your keys, not your coins. When you put them there, people have maybe sometimes learned from Mt. Gox and Celsius and many other bankruptcies that happened, and the learning process continues, I would say. There will be incidents that will impact one of these bigger players at some point where smaller miners will not be affected. But it is, of course, a convenience factor, security for convenience. It's always a trade-off. It's not for everybody, right? So people are, I think, aware that they are giving away some of the income that they would otherwise produce, but they are saving on time. I think that's just something that happens. Also, there are these, I think especially Rocket Pool, has some really cool things going on with, there's like a primary staker that has 16 ETH, and then they have these tag-along stakers, which are like smaller fish. I think that's a quite nice idea how they executed it with very, very limited things. And on this roadmap here, we have the very, somewhere here, like a threshold signatures somewhere. I don't know. It's somewhere here. Threshold signatures for validators, basically, so that you can have really fully decentralized staking, where you don't have to do a complicated setup like Rocket Pool, where it will be much more convenient. So yes, we should continue to educate and to build these tools and to release future, even post Shanghai hard forks that will enable those features. So that's the story. I don't think it's bad right now. I think it's good, but it can always get better. And we should not stop complaining, right? Otherwise, we'll stop improving.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So thanks all. At one time, will the merge then happen then tomorrow morning?
7 a.m.
7 a.m. Central European time?
saw, like 7 a.m. here, like 5 UTC.
Something like that. So when we are at a morning coffee, we'll we'll check out whether the merge is going to happen. So guys, big applause. Thanks that you were here. And we'll be in touch tomorrow. So that was it for today. We will meet up next week again with a roundtable format with 3 topics. NFTs, of course, the topic of the hour, crypto startups and crypto crime, which are the 3 selected topics set in by you. So that's going to be a roundtable for next week on Wednesday. See you next time. Have a glass of wine and enjoy the evening. Thanks for being here.